This is Piers Morgan Live. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. Tonight, Law and Disorder, the crime story shocking America. The two Florida girls drive this 12-year-old to suicide, and should their parents be held responsible?
I really wish that people would have listened to her a long time ago and had really looked into this that was going on when we were reporting it. I really believe that Becca stopped telling me about it because she's seen how much I was trying to get something done and nothing was getting done.
Rebecca Sedgwick's mother talking about her daughter's suicide and the alleged cyberbullying that drove the 12-year-old to jump to her death. Two girls accused of harassing Rebecca are now facing felony charges. Let's get to tonight's Law and Disorder. With me now, legal crisis manager Lanny Davis, author of Crisis Tales, 5 Rules for Coping with Crises in Business, Politics and Life, civil rights attorney Gloria Allred, and Dershowitz, author of Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law. Welcome to all of you. Gloria Allred, it's a very emotive issue, this one, isn't it? I mean, your heart just breaks for the family and for this poor girl who felt the need to take her life. At the same time, how should the law deal with this going forward? Because kids will be kids, not to this disgusting extent, but they will be up to various forms of bullying online. What should the law do about it?
Well, Piers, there's one thing that's very much missing from this conversation, and that is a whole lot more support for the victim of the bullying or the stalking or both. And that means that the victims need to be able to go to someone who has experience in helping victims of bullying and stalking, to counsel them, to give them adequate support, to help them to cope with this, and to make sure that they are there throughout this ordeal that the victims are suffering, so that they know they're not going through this alone.
Anna Dershowitz, what do you think the law should do? I mean, it's a very complicated area, clearly, because as Mark O'Meara said, if you're dealing with a car or a gun or something like that, it's fairly obvious what you should be doing. But when you're dealing with online bullying, what is the best sensible way to frame a law that can deal with it?
Well, it's very hard because you have to balance, on the one hand, freedom of speech and freedom of expression against the very understandable needs of the victim. Look, I had an experience like this. My son, when he was 10 years old, had a serious surgery, and he was bullied by his classmates after that, and the parents of some of the kids encouraged the bullying, and they really scapegoated him, and we had to fight back, and it was very, very difficult. People say, look, kids will be kids. Other people say, look, when somebody commits suicide, there must have been other underlying causes. My son was able to fight back. He had a strong family support. He had a strong support by his teachers and his classmates. But making a law, a criminal law, in a blanket way, holding parents responsible would be a mistake. Prohibiting all kinds of statements on the internet would be a mistake. We need to strike an appropriate balance. It's not easy. You mentioned my book, Taking the Stand. I tell the story of my son and the bullying and how heroically he fought back against the bullying when he was 10 years old. But not everybody has the resources to do that.
I mean, Lanny Davis, what has changed irrevocably is technology. And it doesn't just apply to online bullying, but it applies to online stalking, online threats. All sorts of new menaces can be done in the cloak of anonymity, of secrecy, without anybody else knowing. Computer to computer, phone to phone. We see these cases all the time now. What do you think should be done? What is your thinking on all this from your crisis point of view?
Well, first of all, I have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old was just recently experienced something that turned out was resolved between me and this young boy's father, who took a very strong stand with his son, and we ended up solving it directly between the two boys, and the father's intervention was the most helpful way of these parents that I just saw in denial, rather than being very sympathetic to the victim and angry with a daughter that would post, I don't give a, whatever the word was. I think there's nothing that the law can really do that I can see that can criminalize the behavior of children and impute it to parents. I agree with Alan, that's a very tough legal standard. Not all things can be solved by the law, but perhaps transparency in letting other people know about these parents who are reckless and are not taking a stand and doing something about their children who are bullies. Maybe the transparency and publicity about those parents will be one way to deter that type of behavior.
But Piers,
there's
I'd
this
like
other
to
case.
also say
Oh,
that
sorry, Gloria,
Yeah, that I'd like schools to take more responsibility in this, so that if there's a designated counselor in school and every student is made aware of the counselor that they can go to if, as and when they are bullied. And also, if it's reported to law enforcement, if law enforcement will provide a counselor who can give victim support to that victim of a crime or a potential crime, then at least the victims know where they can go. If they can't go to their own parents or don't feel comfortable in talking with their own parents, they've got somebody they can report to, an experienced person who can be there to help them through it.
Yeah, a final word to you, Alan, which really will tee up the next segment. You have to leave, I know. So I want to ask you about this before the other two get into it. And it's a segue into the political shutdown of the last 2 weeks and Senator Ted Cruz. Your comments to me sparked a big debate because you said to me that at Harvard, one of the brightest students you ever had and a brilliant debater, he's reacted today, and we'll play this clip after the break, saying that given the choice between being reviled in Washington and appreciated in Texas or reviled in Texas and appreciated in Washington, I'd take the former 100 out of 100 times. Is that your man from Harvard?
Yes, and that's exactly what I said on your show the other night. Don't try to discourage him by telling him that he's hurting the Republican Party. He cares about his constituents. He cares about the ideological people who support him. He thinks of himself as a man of principle, and he is a man of principle. And if you're going to defeat him in argument, you have to defeat him on principle grounds. That's why I challenged him to debate him on your show as to whether what he was doing is consistent with the values of the Constitution. I do not think that what he did was consistent with the values of the Constitution. Let him defend himself in the marketplace of ideas.
Do you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to get Senator Cruz and Alan Dershowitz, his old mentor from Harvard, sitting on this show for an hour. Wouldn't that be incredible?
Piers,
I'm going to try and make that happen.
Can I pay for that?
I'm going to make that happen if it kills me. Alan Dershowitz, I think you have to go. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. After the break, Gloria and Lanny will stay. We'll talk more about Senator Cruz, a fascinating guy in many ways. Is he potentially a man who could make a run for the presidency? We'll discuss that next.
This is CNN.
Given the choice between being reviled in Washington, D.C. and appreciated in Texas, or reviled in Texas and appreciated in Washington, I would take the former 100 out of 100 times.
Senator Ted Cruz to ABC News, the man many blame for shutting down the government, but is he the GOP's best chance in 2016? Back with Lanny Davis and Gloria Allred. Lanny Davis, you've been around the Washington bloc a while. What do you make of Senator Ted Cruz? It's too easy to dismiss him as just some renegade. He's obviously smarter than that. What do you make of him?
First of all, beware of people who are dismissing him, and beware of people who impugn his motives. And I grant him sincerity, and I'm a great believer in assuming somebody's sincere and just sincerely disagreeing with his views. But if Democrats are underestimating this guy, I remember my dad, may his soul rest in peace, underestimating a movie actor from California who was on so far the extreme right that he was rooting for him to get the nomination. His name, of course, Ronald Reagan. This guy has solidified the base of the Republican Party that nominates candidates, and he's extremely bright, and I have some respect for him. Even though I completely 100% disagree with him, I think Democrats make a mistake demonizing him.
Yeah, Gloria Allred, what do you make of him as a man, as a politician? When you look at this guy, he's come out of nowhere, seemingly. Are you impressed by what you see and hear, just in terms of the way he conducts himself?
Well, I think he's very bright, but unless the GOP is on some kind of suicide mission, where they would like to just go up in flames in the next election, I would say that they're not going to nominate him for president. That he does obviously represent a lot of people in the Tea Party and some people in Texas who are also very conservative. But I don't see him getting the nomination. I think there's a lot of scar tissue among the GOP right now, because he led them down a path of where they really taking a big hit in the polls. And I think there's going to be a long memory of that when it comes to the nomination for President of the United States next time. So, you know, he can posture, he can pander, and he's very bright, and he's very, you know, telegenic and interesting. But that doesn't mean that he is going to be the nominee next time.
I mean, Lanny Davis, the interesting thing, I think, going forward will be Obamacare and the debate about it. Because, frankly, if the Republicans had not tried to defund it, but have focused more on ignoring shutting down the government, but going after the president on Obamacare the moment it started, because it started so badly, they may have been in a very strong position now, because Obamacare may have many good points to it. I certainly feel it does, in bringing 11 million people into health cover that wouldn't otherwise have it. But in terms of the way the machinery works, the system itself, it's been a pretty unmitigated disaster.
Well, it's pretty early to declare Obamacare failure, because the software in a brand new system of websites that are supposed to cope with 27 million people signing up is going to have its problems. I do think there has been some level of delay that is hurting the Obamacare credibility. I would say that Senator Cruz, Gloria, with all due respect, is going to be tougher than I certainly agree with your views of him, but I respect that he sincerely believes Obamacare is bad policy. And the policy debate on Obamacare, you may recall, in 2010, we lost the Congress because we lost that debate. And I do want the president to be much clearer in his message, talking about crisis management, to take the lead in the deficit and reducing the deficit the way President Clinton did, and to explain the Obamacare system is a private enterprise system. It's not socialism. It's all private insurance companies operating on an internet website with a marketplace called conservative market forces. The president isn't a good messenger when it comes to his own program, and he's allowed Ted Cruz and others to declare it a hopeless disaster when it's really in the early days, and I hope we get through these early days.
Gloria,
I don't think the president's not going to be the messenger next time. I mean, hopefully he'll be a supporter of whomever is going to be the Democratic nominee. It's no secret that I would like that to be Hillary Rodham Clinton. Having said that, it's a long time, really, until the next election. And I think the president's come out okay, despite the fact the government got shut down. I don't think most people are blaming him for that. And as more and more people do get insured, as more and more people appreciate the fact that they are now insured, even though they had a pre-existing condition, I think that that affordable health care, the Obamacare program, is going to be more and more popular.
That may all be true, Gloria, but of course, as everyone knows, and Lanny, you specialise in crises. When you launch something, if you have teething problems, that's one thing. If we're still sitting here in a month's time and the system cannot cope and is simply just not working, then Senator Cruz is going to have an absolute field day, isn't he, with this? And the cause that he has set up in his name, effectively, over the last 2 weeks, albeit, in my view, recklessly shutting down the government. But in terms of him and his standing with the more right-wing members of the Republican Party, you've got to say he could be looking very pretty in a month's time if Obamacare still isn't working properly.
I agree there are going to be difficulties, and he'll look better and better if those difficulties aren't solved. But I also agree with Gloria on two things. First of all, sooner or later it's going to dawn on the American people that they can go to bed at night, never have to worry about not having health insurance if they lose their job or develop a pre-existing condition that makes them uninsurable. And that's going to be more and more popular, just as Social Security had a hard time getting off the ground if you look at the history of the early days of Social Security. But I also agree with Gloria that the person who's going to carry the day as our next president to make sure that this national health care system is a success is my friend Hillary Clinton. So we share that, Gloria.
And there's going to be
question,
many
Gloria.
other issues other than health care in the next election. And I'll pick Ted Cruz against Hillary Rodham Clinton on international affairs any day.
Gloria, let me ask you a final question about Secretary Sebelius. Should she still be in her job, given the pretty appalling breakdown of the Obamacare system, which is on her watch?
I think we need to correct the system to make it easier for people to have access. But no, just removing someone from their job doesn't solve the problem. I just think that the Republicans are looking for a win and some vindictiveness because they just had a loss on the government shutdown. But I don't think taking Sebelius's job is the way to go.
Gloria Allred, Lanny Davis, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you, Piers.
Coming next, my interview with Ann Coulter.